It's my pleasure to introduce the next presenter of the Grovian Museum World Doll Day Spectacular, Mary Senko. She is a member of the Schoenhut Collectors of America, and I think she's going to entice you to have even more interest than you ever had in Schoenhut Dolls, because it's a wonderful story. And so thank you in advance, Mary, for this wonderful program.
Thank you, Anne. I'm very excited today to be here to talk about Albert Schoenhut, his imagination, his innovation, and the courage he said in being an entrepreneur in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. First of all, before we talk about his marvelous toys and everything that evolved from that, let's take just a quick minute to highlight some important things about Albert Schoenhut. Albert Schoenhut was encouraged by the Wanamaker team at one of the big department stores in Philadelphia to come to America and to repair toy pianos that were being built in Germany and sent to America. Given that this is World Doll Day, it's important to realize that many of the first dolls that were coming into America were obviously from Germany, France, and coming to America to be enjoyed by the children here. Well, Albert Schoenhut had an important talent. He was able to repair these toy pianos that were made with glass rods, and he developed on his own a steel rod process for the piano to have a tune, and he created in 1872 the beginnings of the Albert Schoenhut Toy Company, and he started with toy pianos. He made musical instruments, and from there he moved forward with just expanding into all kinds of toy-related items. The first area that Albert Schoenhut went into was the circus items. And we can see here a wooden acrobat girl. I brought just one example of an acrobat, and you can see from this catalog that I brought, this is a copy of a catalog that Albert Schoenhut produced from his company around the end of the 1890s, and he was marketing, actually he started in a flurry with marketing toy circus items, and he had a phenomenal moment. It was basically a paradigm shift moment where Fritz Meinke came into his company, came into his office and said, I have an innovative item that I would like to sell you. I'd like to sell you the patent. And it was a jointed clown, which evolved into our acrobat here and evolved into jointed animals and was the beginning of this Humpty Dumpty circus revolution. There was a wild enthusiasm in America for circus animals, circus performers. Ringling Brothers Circus and P.T. Barnum had a fantastic machine that they created with acrobats and circus events. The tents would go up in a town and everybody would come to the circus. And Albert Schoenhut capitalized on that interest by developing with that jointed clown that Fritz Meinke sold him, developing a small circus toy set that started with a clown, a chair, and a donkey. And that grew into the Humpty Dumpty circus phenomenon, which was pieces and parts. Remember, Albert Schoenhut was innovative, he was an imaginative person, and he was an entrepreneur. And he realized that parents or grandparents or maybe a child that was interested in toys and saved their pennies would come to a store and buy things for themselves, or the parents would buy things for the child, and that they might sell 3 pieces, but then they would come back because they wanted to add an elephant, or they wanted to add a giraffe or a lion or some other animal. Right now on our table, we have Benjamin the Bulldog, and since the Grovian Doll Museum has resident bulldogs, I felt it appropriate to bring Benjamin. we can see Benjamin he's actually hoping that his little girl here is going to give him a treat. Benjamin was one of the toys. That's actually a rare toy in the Schoenhut Circus. But this Humpty Dumpty Circus with that jointed clown then was the precursor to the development of the fantastic wood art perfection dolls. And Schoenhut really created a store with the wood art perfection doll. This is an original box end that the doll would have come in. And the doll herself, or his self, depending on if it was a boy or a girl, and we see in the ad, there's a girl, a wigged girl, and a wigged boy, and we see a carved head boy underneath the big Schoenhut All Wood Perfection Art Doll sign on the label. And it's also impressive to look at the ad, the advertisement here, that it's buy toys made in the USA, promoting making toys in America and buying American-made goods, and Schoenhut strictly being made in America. And if we go back to World Doll Day, it's really exciting and interesting to focus in on the fact that we had manufacturer after manufacturer, cottage industries in Germany and France that were shipping dolls to America to be sold in the big department stores, such as George Borgfeld or FAO Schwartz even, those kinds of big stores that marketed toys from worldwide. Here's Schoenhut, he's packaging his items, American-made goods, and he's shipping them to Europe because the Humpty Dumpty Circus started the phenomenon, and the wood art perfection doll continued that momentum of shipping dolls overseas. So the doll itself, we can see from this doll here, this is the doll as she is, naked. And we just saw that she was standing on her head, which was a big part of the movement that was happening in that period. So he purchased the jointed clown and the patent rights in 1902, and in 1911 he launched the wood art perfection dolls. This particular doll, we believe, is a 16303. The 16 stands for her size, and the 303, 310. We talked about this, and I had 303 in my head, but 310. And we owe a great credit, I should say, to Carol Corson, who in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, tracked down tons of archived materials on Schoenhut, pictures from Schoenhut, and I have several pictures that I can include in comments and follow up after this program is posted. But she was really the figurehead for really doing the identification of these dolls. She's a phenomenal person. She wrote the Pink Bible, which is what a lot of Schoenhut collectors will call it, her book, featuring some very rare Schoenhut dolls. But it was a movement. Schoenhut had a movement of play for children. He wanted realistic play, and as you can see, this doll has the ability to move. She has jointed feet, which is pretty phenomenal, and jointed knees, jointed hips, and she was made to play with. And interestingly enough, many of the dolls that we see today, this is a really pristine example, but you can see that she was washed by a child most likely, or touched by a child repeatedly over time. and she's had some paint loss and so forth, which is a natural result of the play. What's really exciting is that Albert Schoenhut planned for that. He planned that there would be children that would be playing hard with these dolls, playing realistically with these dolls, and that there would be a need to have artists on site in his factory, which in 1908 was named the #1 toy factory in America. And he had, by that time, 500 employees, and he ended up having artists on site that could repaint faces and so forth. So just something to think about when we look at these dolls, that you may see a doll that looks as if she's really fresh. We don't know if maybe that doll was sent back to the factory for a little bit of a makeover, pick me up. We don't know. We see dolls that have their noses dinged or other things, and maybe the family could afford to buy the doll, but they couldn't afford to send it back when they got a ding. So the thing that I've learned, especially reading all the posts on the Schoenhut Doll Cafe, and being a part of the Schoenhut Collectors Club, that there is a certain level of acceptance about the patina of these dolls, and that finding the rarer ones with the rarer faces, or maybe something unusual such as a full wardrobe, which we're going to talk about today, just makes them special. And given that they're American made, that really is probably one of the most phenomenal parts of this doll, that it was one of the most important doll manufacturers and toy manufacturers in the United States, that Albert Schoenhut created that. We're going to look now how Albert Schoenhut actually presented his dolls in boxes and so forth for the public to purchase. This particular doll, she's a beauty. We believe that she is a 300 series. It's difficult to determine if she's a 310 or a 309. It's hard with, I will say this, it's hard with even someone such as Ann Coleman, who we were looking at pictures and looking to identify. It's hard because hairstyles changed over time. Children played with these dolls. Remember, children, these were play dolls and they were realistic. But Albert Schoenhut presented the doll. This is an original union suit. She's a 14 300 series. The dolls typically had socks on. She's missing her socks. And I'm one, if I want to present something with the way she's most original, I want to have her be the way she was when I found her, so I can show her to people and show what I'm talking about. But the Schoenhut dolls were manufactured, and in the box there was a round disc similar to the top of a tomato soup can, and it had two little metal soldered posts, and those posts were used for the feet to hook on. And the feet had holes in them, and we'll pull this off. You can see the shoes had holes and rivets to protect the bottom of the shoe because children were going to be playing with it. And there's holes that are used to position the doll so that it was possible for the child to get a realistic pose for the doll. The doll could wiggle, move, talk, walk, play, and be dropped and be picked up, dusted off, and continue moving. I'm going to put her shoe back on quickly here. What's interesting is that she would have had her socks on, and there's a little groove that's on the top of her thigh. The early Schoenhut dolls would have had a little nail sticking out here at the back of the thigh, and Schoenhut realized that that nail could be potentially dangerous for a child that's playing. It could be caught on a finger and hurt the child. So those nails were eliminated after the first year or two, but the groove was left. And the groove, the sock came up and it was worked around the groove, and then a little string tied possibly, or some other, maybe the mother stitched a little gathering stitch of thread and would tie it, whatever, so that the socks would stay up. reminds me of a movie I saw with Marlon Brando, and he would say, "Socks up, boss." And that was a key thing. Keep your socks up, your shorts down, and look neat and tidy. This particular doll also has her all-wood Perfection doll pin, made in the USA. Again, Albert Schoenhut was born in Germany in 1849, immigrated to America at the age of 17, and was extremely proud to have a company that he started and his goods were made in America because he was proud to have the opportunity. Albert was a son of a family with 12 boys, and he was the youngest. You can imagine that he would have had limited opportunity in Germany. So he honed his skills with the pianos, the toy pianos, and then came to America, was encouraged in that Philadelphia, Pennsylvania community, which is really important history, that there were so many German groups in that Philadelphia area, Germantown, and all around, where he got the support, he had mentorship, and he had encouragement, and he built a fantastic company. So our girl, this is our girl in the way she came. We have another one right here, and this is the one that we're excited to talk about today, and her wardrobe. This particular girl is a 19-inch model. She's a 19308, and we can see that she's just got a wonderful, wonderful look to her. Her face painting is just stunning. And she is in a romper suit that could have been made by the Schoenhut factory, or it could have been made by a family member. One point of interest, remember, we keep going back to this, that Albert Schoenhut was imaginative, he was innovative, and he hired a couturier, and her name was Catherine Reiser, and she actually was a dressmaker. She wasn't a couturier, but he hired her and billed her as something more, which was a big part of what American ingenuity was all about. Let's make it more, let's see it bigger before we get there. And that's who he was. And he hired her in 1915 because he realized, after getting the movement going with his dolls, that people slowed down on buying dolls. Most little girls got one doll, but mothers made clothes and parents and fathers bought clothes. By 1915, Albert Schoenhut had an office in New York, and he had his factory in Philadelphia that took up 2 city blocks. And Albert Schoenhut got into the clothing business and doll clothing business. And we can see here that Albert Schoenhut, with the help of Catherine Reiser, developed some beautiful clothing items that could be purchased. Store-bought clothes started to become a big part of the American institution. The Singer sewing machine was out, the featherweight was in homes, the treadle machine was in homes, and people were sewing, but the factory was also creating clothes. So when the industry, the captains of industry, were building the industry in America, dads were on shopping trips, or they were in town in New York, and they wanted to pick up some items for the dolls. So this could have been a romper that was just plain simple stitched, and then mom added the little tatted trim to her outfit to just dress her up a little bit more. This particular girl is not wearing her original shoes. She does have her original socks on, and you can see that the socks come all the way up, and you can see that ridge that fits right into the thigh, which is really important. This was a big piece. Socks up, boss. Just remember, socks up, everything looking neat and tidy. And our girls' shoes were played with very hard. And we can see the original shoes with the buckles. This one's missing a buckle, but they have their little rivulets, that the stand would go into on the bottom. They're leather, and they were a thin, beautiful leather that was made with the cardboard inside and everything to hold that shoe together. But our little shoes got a bit mucked up. So we found some that work, but they're not exactly her size, but they work. So let's talk about these clothes. Here we have our girl again, and we're going to talk about her wardrobe. What is interesting and exciting about this doll, and I hope you've stayed with me up to this point, was that this doll was actually featured in an advertisement in Antique Doll Collector in 2002. And we can see her here with an image and her wardrobe. And this doll caught the eye of a doll collector in the Seattle, Washington area. I have to point out that I never saw it. I was not the collector that first bought this doll in Seattle, but I am the owner now. And it's interesting how, as doll collectors, we not only have the opportunity to find some wonderful things, we have the privilege and the responsibility to care for these things and keep them in the best condition that we possibly can. And in this particular case, whoever had this doll prior to me did exactly that. And I'm very excited. I purchased this doll at a sale and was able to just have the time of my life going through her trunk. So we're gonna start, and we're gonna give you some fun going through her trunk today. We've got her trunk, her coats, and some other clothes, and we're just one by one going to be talking about them. So let's get started. Our girl is a little fashionista. She has some items that could easily have been made by the factory. This is a wonderful coat that has a snap front, and you can see that this is authentically made. The big brass snaps that are on her coat, that this was an item that was either made by a loving parent, a mother or a grandparent, or it could have been made by someone that was working at the factory and sewing clothes for friends in the neighborhood to make extra pocket money. Remember, Albert Schoenhut came from Germany, and cottage industry and cottage effort was a big part of what he was responsive and used to. Our little girl has a little navy blue and white tam, and so she's got that little accent piece going on to go with her coat. This particular setup is one of my favorites, and I love the way that this dress was done. You can see that there's covered buttons, that there were little loops that were applied to close the coat and carefully stitched. When we look at this particular garment, we look at, this is the part that is just amazing to me, that someone bound the edges so skillfully and really made this a durable toy item, a child's play item. And look at the very clean stitching along the hem. It's just beautifully done. And all of this binding that was applied, and then the loops for closing the coat. It's just beautifully done. And look at the binding along the collar. The styling is quite wonderful. And if we look at these items, just remember 1911 to 1915 into right before America joined the Allies and helped with World War I. Wool. This is wool. So this wool coat with all the trim was probably pieces left over from making a wool coat, and it has that green fabric that could have even been part of a uniform. We don't know, but we do know that it was very skillfully made. And we look at the little muff. Here's a little piece of kind of a plushed, crushed velvet that looks like it could have been fur, and they made it into a little muff for our girl. It's just quite lovely. And she's got a coordinating tam that you can see here for her head. And what's fun is this was a big part of the styling at that time. She would have had her tam on her head and looked quite stylish with it on. We love that. Now let's move along. She does have a summertime hat, which she could wear with her little outfit, which was part of her grouping. And I would need to pin that on if I were going to pose her with it. But she doesn't, because we like her bow, and she has an original set of hair, which we want to try to preserve. So we're gonna put her bow back in her hair. Here's another little hat that when I look at her collection of clothing, I'm not quite entirely sure if this hat was supposed to go this way or maybe was a second hat over here. But again, we look at the skillful stitching. There's a little strap that would have gone under her chin to keep it on her head, which is quite darling. Our last coat, and amazing, most children would have one warm coat. So when we look at her wardrobe, this little girl has 3 warm coats. And we look again at how beautifully made this was with the wool, the little sheep's wool, edging, curly wool, the trim along the bottom, how well that's done, the lining. This is faced on the inside to give it a good amount of strength to hold it together so that it wouldn't stretch with play. These were play dolls that wouldn't stretch with play, and it's just beautifully constructed and just a really darling shape to keep her warm in the wintertime. It came down so that it would keep her toasty warm. And we're delighted when we find special little pieces like this in a wardrobe that a grandmother, a mother could have knit, and this would have been under the tree for our girl at a Christmas event, a Christmas gathering, maybe the Christmas Eve celebration, and she has a little hat that this goes with. Most families could only afford to buy one doll, but Mom, if she was skillful and creative, could give a little girl a wardrobe over time. So a sweater, such as a peach sweater like this, could have been a spring addition for a birthday or for an Easter gift or something like that. We don't know, we can only speculate, but it's lovely, and it's got its darling little tassel palm on the top. Let's move over to talking about a couple of the other outfits that our girl has. I brought an example of a little boy's suit, which again, I want to emphasize. Flexibility, look at how loose it was, comfortable, made of cotton. It was easy to wash and clean. And this would have been something that was basically apropos for the time. And we look at the clothing that our girl has in her wardrobe, and we see that we're right in that period. Our girl has a couple of other dresses. This dress, I suspect, very much could have been a factory dress. Just the manufacturing of it, everything was machine stitched, it's all edged. This dress, to me, when I looked at it and examined it, very much looks like factory. It has the right lines, the right details, the easy to get the arm through the sleeves. It's kind of boxed, but then the styling, you can see the box pleats on the bottom. The styling is quite lovely. And the giveaway is all that serging on the hem that you can see, and then all the top stitching for sewing the hem in. This is a lovely little coat that would have gone with our dress, and I suspect again that this might be an item that could have been a very special commission piece from our Catherine Reiser, the dressmaker at the Schoenhut firm, because it had some wonderful details. We see the drawn work in this piece, but drawn work was a big part of that period in linens and so forth. So if a person were skilled, they could do that kind of work themselves. We see this particular dress. This again looks very much like a factory original dress. And we see the top stitching, we see the detail of the pearl buttons, lots of top stitching, lots of extra little details with these special little cuffs and the pearl buttons that are accentuating the cuff, the silk ribbon around the waist, accentuating it, and it really does lend itself to making you think that this was factory original. And we look at the hooks to close it because these were play toys and we wanted to make it easy for the child to dress the doll. Our lovely little dress has an overcoat which has some beautiful detail and a spring overcoat to go over that beautiful dress or that beautiful dress. And notice the emphasis on mix and match. Albert Schoenhut was an innovator. He wanted things to mix and match, and he wanted parents to buy more than one garment at a time. So if you bought this dress, let me show you a coat that would look lovely with that dress. Or if you bought this dress, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, let me show you a coat that would look lovely with that dress. Here is a romper that I found along the way, and I want to point out that I think that this romper, again, could very easily have been a piece that was from the company. We can see all the detail work, and it's a little bit stained, and this particular romper would have been for a 14-inch or 16-inch. And the denotion for the labeling that I want to point out, I had a piece here. Here it is. This is, that came off of a box. I found it at a sale. It was Character Girl Doll, not dressed, size 14 inches, curled mohair wig, and her number is 14316C. Her model was the 300 series 316C, and her sizing is 14 inches. The doll wasn't dressed, and this looks like a factory romper that someone could have picked up to put on this doll. Sadly, this was the only part of the doll that I found. I didn't find the doll, but I did find the romper, and I found this piece of box. You never know what you're going to find in attics or basements of estate sales. This particular piece, this is one of my favorites, and what I love about this item is that this shows ingenuity to the nth degree. This is a little apron that is sitting over a dress that looks to be factory original with the trim and the detail, and I'll pull the apron off. But this particular apron is easy to get on the doll. And what's important here is that when we're sewing for our Schoenhuts, to think about how did Albert Schoenhut create things that would be easy for children. This would just slide right over. No trying to get the sleeve through something. There was a big opening here. It would slide over the sleeve. Easy to button up, And buttoning items on dolls, playing and doing small finger work was really important to teach children dexterity and just a manual ability to be able to work with things. It was the forefront for teaching girls how to do things at home and teaching boys. But this particular apron slides off and we see the classic Schoenhut dress. This would have been easily a factory dress that would have fit our 16-year-old Schoenhut that we have here with her trunk. And maybe mom got concerned that our little girl wanted to play in the kitchens too much, so she created this apron. Or I look at it and I think Albert Schoenhut all over the place with the innovation of leaving the holes open and creating just kind of an over-the-top piece. As we wrap up our discussion of our beautiful wood art perfection doll with her wardrobe, no wardrobe is complete without a trunk to keep it in. And interestingly enough, this trunk was one of the parts that caught my eye at the sale, and you can see why. Look at these children playing. Look at all the play that was going on. The little boy is shooting with a gun. This little boy is playing with his balloon. These little girls are over here playing in the yard with the fence. There's all kinds of things going on this trunk. This particular trunk is as I found it, and inside the trunk, there's a beautiful little tray that all of her hats and other accessories could be set in. And the trunk is lined with a beautiful paper, just a clean cream paper. Remember, Albert Schoenhut as a businessman would have done something like this. He would have had a beautiful lining, but it didn't have to be figural. The lining could have been just a nice clean cream paper. I love the way that just makes a nice setting to put these clothes in. And these clothes have been living fresh in this trunk since 1911 to 1915. Our girl entered the world possibly right around that time, 1911 to 1912, 1913, and she's had her wardrobe that was built for her over time. I want to thank you for taking a few minutes for me to talk about Schoenhut's wood art perfection doll. I love the ingenuity, I love the imagination, I love his entrepreneurship, but mostly I love sharing that with you. Thank you.